swings or shifts kind of, I hate to say before they occur, but as they occur. There's clues, right? So let me say it a little bit differently. When we're at this lower edge of DVA, the DVA would have us expect more of the same until proven otherwise, right? So the expectation is that we continue rotational and eventually make our way back up to testing the upper extreme. And by extreme, these outer extremes, right? Beyond the plus and minus one, or at or beyond, I should really say. If that's not happening, what's not happening, and it starts to spend some time, and there's several attempts at turning and pushing from buyers in this case, and they kind of show us that they're weak, especially relative to what sellers have. We see that flaggy order flow. This is not surprising, is it? See, we're putting together these frameworks and expectations that tells us what's normal, tells us where something's diverging from normalcy, and giving us information so that we can use it to scalp. So that's a very concise, to the point framework for scalpers to use DVA. We need to understand where we're at an extreme. That can bring us back to the concept of energy. If we're at an extreme and you're going to go with a trade at an extreme, so if we were at the lower extreme here and you're going to be shorting and going with that, and maybe it happens right here, right? Maybe you shorted that little guy right there based on what was happening. Well, you need to understand that there's going to need to be energy to make that work, because we've already used energy to get down to here. We're at a lower extreme. We've already spent energy. If a continuation type of move based on the movement that brought us to this hard right edge point in time is going to work, it's going to require energy. And we got that. Look how big those moves were. Useful to know as you're figuring out how to see markets. As I mentioned, a lot of chop in the middle area. Right now we're seeing that, but once you get to the upper extreme regions, that's where upper and low, any extreme region, that's where you're seeing a bit more cleaner turns and things like that. Recently when we got into the middle, even though like there's a flag here kind of that broke and you'd expect, a nice momentum move, guess what? It was choppy in the middle of DVA right there. Not that it always happens. Here's a nice clean move through the middle of DVA, right? But just generality kind of stuff. So I really think that covers DVA in the sense that we need to use it for scalping. It is a fantastic tool. There's nothing magic about it. Knowing where you're at extremes is very important, because there's an expectation of, look, if something's going to continue from here, it's going to take a lot of energy. What's more normal is that energy has been dissipated and we actually fade those regions, right? The way to trade with DVA is to essentially fade extremes when we're rotational and go with continuation when we're imbalanced. That's the general spiel on DVA. Scalpers, just knowing where you are within all that framework is important, but it's not going to be like it is in the NADRO world, where it's very much a requirement for a decent trade. We're probably going to still follow those requirements a lot, but it's not going to be as mandatory, as rigid. We're not going to really care about, as much about, okay, current market condition, established imbalances, can't do this, can't do that, blah, blah, blah. We're going to use this as a general framework and signpost as to where we're at right now, and have those energy expectations and whatnot, and just common sense once you develop all these frameworks for what your expectations might be. Timing. Timing in scalping is obviously paramount. It makes or breaks your success. There is no room for error. Let's talk about the concept of timing as it relates to a really cool stat, which we're eventually going to get into the new Insights trader dashboard that we built out. And it's going to be really good, not just kind of good like some other people do it where they kind of guess at it. It's going to be really good. Let's talk about it real quick. MAE stands for max adverse excursion, and MFE stands for max favorable excursion. If we get long, right, and the market does this, and then this, and then this, and then we exit, here's our point of entry. Here's our entry price. This would be our max adverse excursion. And this would be our max favorable excursion. How far did it, what was the highest point it went, right? The most favorable. If we were short, obviously we would flip these. This would be the max If we were short, this would be the max favorable excursion. This would be the max adverse excursion. And short or long, here's our exit price. MAE and MFE don't take into consideration exit price. Nothing else exists other than the highest point and the lowest point during that time relative to a long or short position. So if we start to take a look at MAE, MFE data, and actually we could, I didn't plan on doing this, but let's pull up I know that I have a slide way down the road here where we look at kind of a little bit of case studies and stuff. Let me see if I can find that. Wow, I clicked on the right slide. Slide 75. Did not even know. What I did here was I got short here, and the market really didn't go in my favor, and it went up, and I exited. So that was the starting point of the measurement and the ending point of the measurement. I pretty much took no favorable excursion and this much adverse excursion. It was adverse, so I marked it red. Bad, adverse. I shorted, it went in my favor without ever going a tick against me, came all the way back, and I exited. So again, little to no P&L, but this was my max favorable excursion. Here's a short, favorable excursion, adverse excursion. Here's a short, no adverse excursion, maybe a tick. I'm just not counting that. Here's the favorable excursion point, and then again, exit, doesn't matter. In, no tick against me, big favorable excursion, and I closed the trade out here. And then I took all these boxes and I copied them over from a 0 starting point, right? And the point was to show, okay, here's for this session, here's how much heat I took, and here's how much favorable excursion I had. Here's my total MAE for this day. Here's my total MFE, favorable excursion, for this session. You keep putting days like this together, and I don't care if they're all crappy scratches and I actually didn't make any money on this day. That's timing. That's timing in a nutshell, as defined by MAE, MFE. How is the trade moving in your favor relative to the heat you're taking in order to do so? The better your general timing is on entries, the better your risk reward profile is, the more you can size up your trading while maintaining appropriate risk. If your timing sucks, you end up having to trade with wide stops, is essentially what we're saying. If you can't time trades, you can't have tight stops. And so you can't therefore size up your trades as much. So timing allows you to get bigger and make more for the same amount of risk. You can't hesitate. You can't be afraid. Whoever I was talking with in the chat earlier, if there's hesitation, if there are fears, the next point down there, fear can cause both early and late entries. Fear can cause us to get in before we should. Fear can cause us to get in well after we should have, right? All kinds of fears that can show up, FOMO, different things, but they're all based out of fear for the future. Oh, this trade might go without me if I don't get in now. Right? It's fear about the uncertainty of the future. There's other fears, and you know, fear is a very important topic to understand as a trader. Fear only shows up in life or trading when you look backwards or you look forwards. There is no fear in the present moment. So maybe a little too deep for this morning before the second cup of coffee, but it's good stuff. You cannot fumble with your platform or hotkeys or things like that. You have to know how to do it. You have to have the physical skills that you've gotten habits for doing quickly. You gotta have all that in place in order to have good timing, in order to start to see good MAE, MFE data. You got to put the market skills. You got to be able to trade well and identify and learn all the things we're learning in this course about market generated information. You got to have that. You got to have your mind, and then you got to have the literal physical platform skill and know how to do it quickly and efficiently. Entries, pulling the trigger. We're not talking about how to find the best entries right now. We're talking about the moment of pulling the trigger, given that it's a given that everything else led us to wanting to pull the trigger. It's actually really simple. It's rhythm. It's understanding kind of all three components. What is the current rhythm? Have we had enough of a counter rotation here? And then is there enough of a little momentum shift to trigger us in, to pull the trigger? There are other factors that will go into how good your entries are on average. Again, we're not even talking about, obviously, how good your entries are going to depend on all the other stuff that led you to want to be getting long or short, right? Order flow, all the stuff. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about the timing of your entries and the quality of them on average, just with triggering in, not the trade idea or the setup, just the trigger. Number one, getting good at seeing enough of a momentum shift. I understand that you know, a trader starting out is going to look at a move down, and there's going to be some that say that's enough or an entry. And there's going to be some, and that's a mistake because it's not enough, let's say. And there's going to be other traders who say, okay, that's enough. That's obviously another mistake, right? Somewhere in between those two, right, much closer to this one than this one, is getting good at recognizing what is enough of a momentum shift. How clean the movement is, as we've talked about, will help you see momentum shifts better because it's very clean, and so there's less noise. If it's very messy, well, then guess what? See the size of this up move, and we said it was a nice trigger. What if we had that same size up move from here? Is it a nice trigger? No, it's not. It's just more of the same. Getting good at discerning believable momentum shifts from noise. There are times at my level of skill where the market is like this, and I still can pick a tiny momentum shift, and that's my entry, and it ends up being a really good one, even though it was still within the noise, right? What's a believable shift? How can we use order flow, speed of tape, all these things we've talked about, right? To be able to discern, hey, look, there's quite a bit of energy here. Oh, hey, late rotation capitulation there, blah, blah, blah. Oh, finally the stop run through an area that mattered right there. versus not here, not here, not here, not here. There was no late rotation capitulation. Maybe a divergence started to form. Then we get late rotation capitulation. We get a stop run. Huge strength from buyers starting to come in, for example, on a short term contextual shift. We pick a better spot, and it's a more believable momentum shift. Speed of tape is a big one, right? On those moves versus just muddy, just okay, it's turning, but there's no energy. And then the general speed or energy of the environment and what you can get away with. That's something we've talked about, but it applies to picking good spots. You know, if the speed is energy and really high and things are flying around, you can get away with what you can do in terms of how good an entry is. We talked about it, right? Maybe it's really small, quick pullbacks versus what you would normally need. You would not take these. You would need to see something like this, and then you could take that, right? And by this or that, I mean shallow, hardly any pullbacks, no amount of bars to them. And then all of a sudden you get a really nice pullback that meets your rhythm requirements. Speed of the tape and energy allow us to get away with things that we couldn't otherwise get away with. If you misapply that and you have, again, how good are you at understanding speed and energy and what that is like on a moment-to-moment basis or session to session, and you think it's high and you try to get away with something because you're just lying to yourself because you want to be in that position for some recency bias reason or whatever it is, or maybe you're just misinformed about reading energy and stuff and speed of tape as you are practicing and learning, then you make mistakes. You think you can get away with something and you can't. You can't consistently. Anything will work once, right? Our job is to try to do things that are going to work on the whole enough, given the risk reward, over the next 100 trades. That's how we have to think. Get out of the moment of this and focus on doing things that are going to give you good results over large sample. I'll share with you a little important epiphany real quick. As a scalper, as essentially any type of trader, 100% of your returns, let's say you have a nice equity curve, you're profitable. 100% of that positive P&L, positive net P&L, what you end up with in the account, 100% of it will come from something like 5% of your trades. Really? Does that not have, for me and a lot of people I share that with, that has ridiculous implications. It allows us to realize that 90% of the time, 95% of the time, where it's a valid endeavor, but we're spinning our wheels. So why are you so amped up about this trade or the next trade? 95% of the time you end up just like breaking even, and only 5 or 10% of those results or less are the what nets you P&L. It's wild. And it's true. So here's a basic entries kind of checklist, and we're going to get more detailed about these next. Rhythm, all the components of order flow, stop runs, DVA, which we've introduced today, price, it's how it's moving, its patterns, momentum, context, if that's something that we're bringing in from elsewhere, and then a category for other, which is speed or energy or what didn't happen. Those are a little bit, I think, different and deserving of kind of their own catch-all other category. We could call it environment, but you know, whatever. Rhythm. So we're talking about potentially trading here, guys. Are we in rhythm? Do we understand the current rhythm of the market? Have we had enough of a counter rotation? Is there the beginnings of a momentum shift in price? And what I've tried to do here, this